It appears that I have to straighten out people's ideas about things. Okay, so first of all, this notion of MMT, modern monetary theory, is an attempt to rope back Chartalism, which was well established by the late 19th century, quoted by Keynes in an early work, the treatise on money, as being settled economic theory. So, what is Chartalism? Chartalism is the notion that all currency, all money, is a charter, a document of the state. And so it's created for purposes of being money, and money being a medium of exchange exclusively. Anybody that tells you this nonsense of has to be a store of value, no, that's an asset. Okay, so let's make it clear. You have assets, which are stores of value, and you have money, which is a medium of exchange. Money in and of itself is worthless. Let me emphasize, money in and of itself is worthless. There's absolutely no harm in creating more money because it's worthless by itself. It's simply a medium of exchange. It's a hot potato that we pass around. So, what Chartalism says is pointing out the very obvious fact that money is created by a state or by something that is like a state. What's like a state? Banks. When a bank gives somebody a loan, they are creating money by giving them that loan. And then the person is finishing the job of that by spending it into the economy, by using it to buy something. And then what happens with the bank as state is that it's expecting to get payments back on that. They want the money plus interest that they had lent out. So they are taking the principal and they are destroying the money that they created by giving the loan. So, how does that work for a conventional state? Conventional state, that is the government of currency, the one that establishes the charter from which we get the word chartalism, that is the currency that it's spending into the economy, they create it by spending it into the economy. Take a look at all those coins, or even better, the bills that you have, say from the Federal Reserve, whatever. Okay, if you stick it under a mattress, or if they stick it in Fort Knox, it's not money. You can't use it as an exchange. It is spent into the economy through government spending. It is created by being spent into the economy. Just the way that a loan money, debt money, is created by being spent into the economy by the person that receives the loan to purchase something. So, and as the loan money, the debt money gets destroyed, as people pay back the loan, the principal of it, so fiscal money created by the government of currency, when it's spending money for various government expenditures, no matter what they are, is destroyed by being received as taxes. So you have this cycle, the Chartist cycle. This was well established well before people came up with the modern monetary theory baloney, which is just basically a dodge to cover over the fact that they don't want to actually ascribe to Chartalism. They want to put in this notion that money is some sort of store of value, which it isn't. Money is worthless. It's a numeraire. It's a IOU, but with an arbitrary value, and it's worth so much today and so much the next day, and depends upon what you're using it to exchange things. So it's a deferred exchange is what it is. But at any rate, currency, money, is a medium of exchange. What the MMT people are doing is that they are saying, oh, well, no, we have to borrow money in order to do the spending. Why? There's no reason to have that. Scrap the borrowing. That's something that the banks do. Let the banks fiddle with the borrowing. A government of currency, a state that is able to establish currency, just spends the money into the economy and takes it back again in taxes. Creates it by spending into the economy, destroys it by receiving it again as taxes. So, in our current situation, I wrote a book, The Way Out, or How Electronic Revenue Credits Can Do All These Wonderful Things. I explained how we can create a new go-between between the Treasury and the central bank, in this case being represented by the Federal Reserve System. And these electronic revenue credits are this little chip that gets packed back and forth. So what does it mean? Well, the Treasury sells an electronic revenue credit to the Federal Reserve for so much money that the Federal Reserve as a bank can create through its mechanism as this central bank. It's actually not necessary to have that go-between, at least in an ongoing economy, but fine. We'll deal with it because we have a heap load of federal debt. So the Federal Reserve then decides, well, are we going to throw out some ledger money, helicopter money, as Ben Bernanke put it, or are we going to sell this asset of the bank or that one or whatever in order to supply that money to the Treasury, which is the one that then spends it into the economy through the various expenditures. And we put it in there on their court because they're the ones that are saying, oh, well, we need to control inflation. What? So fine, control inflation. Sometimes you sell some assets that you have, and therefore you are taking some money out of supply from the people that are purchasing the asset that you, the Federal Reserve, are holding. And then you are putting that into the Treasury's account. No increase in the money supply because they're going to just go and spend the money that you put into their account. So as money coming in, balances money going out. Or say, well, we can live with some inflation. Fine. So they create the helicopter money, and the money supply is increased, and more money is chasing the same number of goods, presumably. and then inflation goes up. What happens when inflation goes up? I'm talking generally, not these sort of directed inflation, which I discuss in uh, The Way Out and also in Popular Capitalism, but the general inflation. If there's a general inflation, then the economic transactions that are generated by that, because all inflation is stimulus, the economic transactions which are generated by that then get taxed at various points, a portion of it, and money comes back to the government of currency, and it is at a higher numeraire because of inflation. There's more of the money supply, the higher the price level is, the higher the tax price level is, and so more money comes back. And if there are no other changes in the economy, then there's a surplus, a temporary surplus, of course, but there's a surplus, and that is going to reduce the money supply because all this money is coming back in the form of taxes. So these things flow naturally. Now, I have also addressed uh, uh, in The Way Out, particularly, the canard about the Weimar Republic and the massive inflation that they had there. There is one reason for that massive inflation, that hyperinflation. Debt. Debt. It's debt. What debt? What debt? Oh, okay. Read The Economic Consequences of the Peace. It's a work by John Maynard Keynes, in disgust at what happened at the Versailles Treaty. What happened at the Versailles Treaty was that reparations were imposed upon Germany and Austria and some of the other combatants. But in the case of Germany, in the case of the Weimar Republic, which had to deal with this, it was an unpayable debt. It was impossible for the Weimar Republic to pay the debt. Further, they took the lovely conservative notion of, oh, well, money is a store of value. No, it's bullshit. Money is worthless. But then when you ask for them to pay, not in money, but in gold, then you create the conditions for hyperinflation. Why? Okay. Germany could only have so much gold. So it has to go out and buy the gold. It's an asset, remember? They have to buy the gold. So quite naturally, since they don't have the resources because it's being drained from them, as Keynes pointed out, there was no physical way for them to be able to pay for it through the conventional productive assets that they might have in terms of mining, in terms of finished products, in terms of pretty much anything in their economy, toted it all up. There's not enough money in the there's not enough value in the economy in order to pay the reparations in gold. People should have recognized this is the exact same thing that happened with Haiti when they had the slave revolt. And a debt payable only in gold was imposed upon them. And it left them devastated. So that's the reason why there was hyperinflation. There was no physical way for Germany to pay back the debt in gold. the reparations in gold. So everybody was expecting that. It was quite obvious. They didn't have the money. They didn't have the resources. They didn't have the productive capacity in order to pay this ridiculous reparations that were imposed upon them by Clemenceau and Wilson and so on. It was impossible. So they did the next best thing. They printed up money. But everybody is expecting that they're going to print up money because of the debt. So the future expectation of an increase in the money supply created a vicious cycle of speculation. The marks were going to be worth less and less and less and less compared to other things, in particular with respect to gold. So everybody expected that was going to be the case, and so there was going to be hyperinflation because of the debt, not because they printed up money in response to the debt. So as long as there is expectation that the debt will continue, that it will be unpayable, then you're going to end up with hyperinflation because the country is forced into that corner. But if you use new money to pay down the debt, then the expectation is that the debt's going to decrease and that the need to print money to pay the debt off is going to decrease. Then you're going to have an expectation of deflation. Even though your money supply is for the moment increasing, looking out to the horizon, it's going to be less and less and less that's going to have to be generated in order to pay off the debt. And the prospect for future debt is declining and declining and declining. But this only works if you actually have a regime that pays off the debt, that makes that commitment, that decides, as I propose in The Way Out, a abolition of any future debt instruments. Treasuries, the ones that are out there, we'll pay them off, but we're not going to create any new ones. This is the exact opposite of what the advocates of MMT are proposing. The advocates of MMT are proposing that the Treasury create more debt and that the Federal Reserve make a pledge to buy it all. But then where does that leave the Treasury? How are we going to pay back that debt? Oh, well, the Treasury is just going to hold on to it, and they'll always, buy it and make sure that it's not going to go into foreign hands like China, which is the reason why we have the so-called trade crisis with China. We've been exporting financial products. We've been exporting treasuries, and China's been importing them. There is a balance of trade. The balance of trade is that our financial exports are matched by our real imports. So it's always been balanced. It's just that we create debt and it's killing us. So we need to eliminate the federal debt. And of course, would help immensely if there was a $1,500 weekly citizen stipend so that people can pay off the debt that they have with that other state, the banks. And that is why we need to use the policy that I advocated in The Way Out, which I explained a little bit of it here, only a little more detail in The Way Out. It's CP Clapper, The Way Out, how electronic revenue credits can end the debt crisis, and so on. You can look it up on Amazon, whatever. Get yourself a copy. They'll give you something to talk to some of these nitwits. They're continuing to put out this garbage, which I don't think they actually believe any of this nonsense that they're putting out. But they want you to believe it, and they want to be apparent that you believe it. And if you say, no, it's nonsense, we just need to take the way out of this whole debt-based fiscal system, and we need to give everybody, each citizen, a $1,500 weekly stipend so that they can buy stuff and they can generate commerce, and the commerce then can create taxes, which then comes back to the federal government and helps pay off some of that. And simultaneously, by paying off the federal debt, it's also increasing the money supply, stimulating the economy, and bringing the taxes from that stimulus in to destroy some of the new money that is created. And I think, and I go through in both Popular Capitalism and The Way Out, the notion that this particular process could easily produce deflation. It just depends upon how the money supply is adjusted in this, because we have two money supplies. We have the fiscal money supply, and then we have the debt money supply. That's the one that the banks, when they give you loans and creating debt money, it's their money supply. And the $1,500 weekly citizen stipend will allow people to pay off that, especially if they have some other income. Well, how they get some other income besides the $1,500? Well, because everybody's going to be able to pay for the rent or the mortgage. They're going to be able to pay for groceries. They're going to be able to pay for clothing, toiletries, other items that they need, and whatever else that they deem personally are necessities. And so all that money going to the landlord, going to the banks, going to the grocery stores, going to the pharmacy, going to the clothing manufacturers and stores, if they happen to have those open under a strict virus-proof form of opening their stores, then that money is going to be distributed to the various people that have allowed those enterprises to work and are able to work because they're getting the money. And so they, in receiving that money, are able to spend on some certain things that we would consider luxuries. Or they can use it to pay down their debts. And this is where the inflation comes into play. If they're using it, any of the excess, to pay down their debts, they are decreasing the debt money supply directly, and therefore decreasing the total money supply and creating deflation. So I hope that explained it all to you. Again, I've got several other videos. You can go through those. I've got Popular Capitalism. I have The Way Out. That also explains various aspects of what I've been explaining here in more detail and in a broader framework. especially popular capitalism. It's an entire uh, solution to the problem of poverty through a reimagining of political economy. So again, spread this around. Thanks, bye.